praying to Lank God and he saved him.
Welcome to hell. It's your boy Lanky, aka Lank God, aka Lupin, buying Poupon with that 5-finger coupon. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about common songwriting devices. I've said before that I think songwriting is probably harder than producing, shocker to a lot of people who make beats and stuff, because music theory is hard and fast and set in stone, and there are a million resources that you can learn about it for free easily online, and as soon as you figure it out, you'll probably make good stuff. It's really not that hard. You know, it's the hardest part is learning the DAW, and that takes like a day of YouTube tutorials, and then you got it going. But songwriting isn't actually that hard. I think that people just struggle to identify or understand the structures that you use for songwriting, and most people are probably familiar with them, but it's a little more difficult for them to notice them and observe them, even if they passively enjoy them. So I'm just going to point out some different poetic devices, literary devices that are commonly used in songwriting, and throw some examples at you, and hopefully it'll help you kind of think more analytically about the music you listen to, because I personally think the best way to improve, especially as a songwriter, is to just analyze music that you enjoy, songwriters that you enjoy, books, movies, different things you like. You can find inspiration in anything that you can relate with language. Obviously, this is not an exhaustive overview of every poetic device that there is, but if you really wanted to go ham with it, you could go to literarydevices.net, and there's a large list, and you can just read them all and do whatever you want. I'm just covering stuff that I think is most relevant to songwriting. So I've broken these kinds of different devices and techniques into 3 categories. They're pretty broad, though. The structural, the textural, and the intellectual. So we'll start with structure. Now, obviously a big thing in lyricism, poetry, is rhyming. Cat sounds like bat, sounds like hat. The last syllable sounds the same as the other thing. Protract, contact, they rhyme. We get it. But that's a really basic way of looking at it. If you just do single-syllable rhymes, it kind of comes off as Dr. Seussy. So you can avoid sounding too basic by including multisyllabic rhymes and internal rhymes, which is, internal rhymes would be like, you know, you have the rhyming word at the end of the sentence, but you also include a rhyme in the middle. It might also rhyme with the word at the end of the line, or maybe it's an internal rhyme that rhymes with another word in the next bar in the middle, rather than at the end. So to use an example from an older thing that I wrote when Chance the Rapper dropped How Great, I did a remix of that. And the first bar is, I'm dedicated to getting famous or getting faded. Like some jeans, so it seems, I guess I made it. Within those 2 bars, you have the root of the rhyme is dedicated, 3-syllable word, and I rhyme it with getting famous, getting faded, guess I made it, and then I continue. And so those aren't perfect rhymes, but when you do multisyllabic rhymes, it's a lot easier to make a off rhyme sound good. And this is especially useful if you've got like a certain kind of delivery where maybe you've got an accent or something, and so the way that you talk or sing, certain words might sound a little different from how other people say them with a different kind of accent, and you can use that to your advantage to make more interesting rhymes that maybe other people aren't able to. And Danny Brown is like the king of it. And you know, people, nerds, librarians who fucking read poetry or whatever are gonna be like, oh, B rhymes and assonance, not technically a rhyme, that's stupid. It's all rhyming, who gives a shit? So you can vary it up. Multisyllabic rhymes, so like dedicated, getting famous, or the internal aspect of it. So I rhyme, I'm dedicated to getting famous or getting faded. And getting faded is the end of the bar, but I've got 2 more internal rhymes that fit that structure, and then it continues to a setup and a punchline in the next bar. So rhyming's pretty straightforward, we all know about it. If you want to get better, I suggest you like read books and stuff, just shit that'll improve your vocabulary. That way you've got a greater depth of different words to pull from. Freestyling can help as well, because you kind of, you know, it's just on the spot, it improves your quick thinking. Now, rhythm is something that a lot of beginners can struggle with, but basically you just need to think of your voice as another musical instrument, so it needs to be on beat, and traditional structure applies. Each syllable is a note. Just match the syllables with the beats. Stressing different syllables is very important for rhythm. Typically you want to like change your flows across the song, change the rhythm a little bit, keep things interesting, but it is important that for a certain section you maintain a certain rhythmic pattern with the vocal, because that's how you get like a build up and a payoff with within the space of 2 bars, 4 bars, is by adhering to a pattern. That way you can build up with the first one, and then when the others follow, people kind of know what to expect and they get into the rhythm. So if you have the same number of syllables, but the stresses are different, it's going to sound different. It won't sound like the same flow. Like all of Shakespeare's stuff is iambic pentameter, which means that it alternates stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed. And when you read it, it all has this certain rhythm to it. Keep that in mind. You can change where you stress certain words to change up the rhythm. You do want to have some sort of rhythmic foundation to build on, even if that foundation is changing a few times across the song. It's good to maintain it for a few bars, because that way the listener kind of sections it out in their head. It's easy for them to follow the direction of an established foundation. If you're never really established a specific rhythm and keep switching it up every bar or something, then it doesn't really feel like it's going anywhere. It just is going. Now, melody will apply more for people who are like singer-songwriters than for people rapping and stuff. Obviously, if you rap, you can just slap auto-tune on there and just play with your voice. Make sure it's in key, though. And that's true of, if you're gonna write a melody, make sure you're on key. You'll probably want to learn a little bit about music theory and stuff so that you know which key you're singing in and all that. But most people are pretty good at naturally kind of feeling it. I don't necessarily know what F sharp minor is, but if I sing along to a song that is F sharp minor, I can tell if I'm in key or not, because I know kind of what my ear expects from all the other songs that I've listened to. So definitely go with your gut, but definitely valid to learn some music theory to back it up, especially if you want to do more advanced stuff like harmonies and stuff like that, because even if a listener doesn't know music theory, they're going to hear that flat or that sharp note. Now, I wanted to mention repetition. I think people are quick to call music, oh, trap music, it's so repetitive. This is so repetitive, that is so repetitive. The fact of the matter is, all music is repetitive. Music is built on repetition, whether that's instrumental repetition, like I mentioned before, sticking to a certain foundation for a rhythm for a few bars. You want to repeat that rhythm a few times so that the audience can get attached to it, can understand it and follow it. And repetition, really common, obviously. Choruses typically repeat a couple times throughout a song, and a lot of times there will be repetition within the body of the chorus. Repetition is a useful tool to emphasize something or just to make it more memorable. And if, you repeat something, it can draw attention to subtext or a double meaning or something. It gives the audience a second opportunity to think about a line, or a third or a fourth, depending on how many times you repeat it. And it's totally valid. Maybe there isn't a double meaning, but you like how it sounds, and you want it to stick with the audience. That's as good a reason as any to repeat the line. Repetition comes in a lot of different forms as far as songwriting goes, whether it's very literal repetition or more subtle. For a more literal one, you could listen to Combination Pizza Hut and Taco Bell by Das Racist. It's just, I'm at the Pizza Hut, I'm at the Taco Bell, I'm at the Combination Pizza Hut and Taco Bell like 100 times before they change any lyrics. And it might seem, extreme or hyperbolic or whatever, but it works as a piece of art. It's a weird song, but it's making a statement about like consumerism and capitalism, and part of that is the repetition. It's like, it relates to like advertising or whatever. You can kind of apply different meanings to it that you wouldn't apply if it wasn't being repeated over and over and over again. Now, near to the middle of the spectrum on the scale of repetition, there's like 22 Twos by Jay-Z, which is just a song where he says some version of 2, 2, or 2 22 times. And it's one word that's being included as a variety of different lyrics and phrases. So it's still repetition, but it's a bit more subtle than saying one line 100 times. He's saying the word 2 22 times and drawing attention to that intentionally. It's like what the song is built around. But it's also not just him saying 2 2 2 2. He hits those twos really hard and gives the song a solid foundation. And then, of course, most common use of repetition in songwriting is just a repeated chorus. Now, in line with that idea of repetition, you have alliteration, which is repetition of an individual consonant sound or vowel. I mean, if you want an example, you could listen to Alphabet Aerobics by Blackalicious, but you shouldn't. The song sucks. It's for nerds. If you want a better example, I'd go for P's and Q's by Mick Jenkins, because that's a song that actually has content to it, but also definitely deals with alliteration. So, alliteration doesn't need to be dragged out across an entire song, though. You can use smaller 2 or 3 word combos to make a single line a little more interesting. So for instance, at one point I say, stab me in the back and I'll block your phone. I don't need nobody, but I'm not alone. And that bar, the first line, stab me in the back and I'll block your phone. The back and block just sound nice together. Makes it a little more interesting than maybe wording it another way would. So on to more textural elements of songwriting. Now, one aspect that isn't written down but is worth mentioning is your delivery, basically the body language of the words. So it's nice to experiment with different deliveries, can kind of make the meaning of the lyrics change, whatever you want to do. Definitely recommend varying your delivery across the course of the song. You know, and when you're writing a song, you probably want to think about if you're going to insert specific ad-libs, if you're going to have certain parts with vocal doubles, maybe you want harmony. And you don't necessarily need to write that stuff down, but you should have some way of knowing what goes where. Me, I just think of it in my head. I kind of know exactly what I want a song to sound like as I'm writing it, and then I'll just do like a take with ad-libs usually, and the ad-libs suck because I don't think about them. People just tell me I should do ad-libs. Now, imagery, there will be a couple more specific things about this, but imagery is nice because it can convey emotion without just literally saying, oh, I feel like this, which is super boring. Also, imagery, very valuable for storytelling, for painting a scene without just literally saying, we were at the gas station, or whatever, which is super boring. You can listen to any J. Cole song. People are like, oh, he's a great storyteller. And it's like, no, he's not. He's just not. He's a terrible storyteller. He just literally says what happens. Now, after you listen to some garbage-ass J. Cole, go listen to a Biggie album. That motherfucker is an amazing storyteller, and it's because he's not just saying, oh, he's giving you details about a scene. If you picture it in your head, you get a good idea of what's happening. Another good example would be like Stairway to Heaven, opening line, there's a lady who knows all that glitters is gold, and she's buying a stairway to heaven. So, you know, lady who knows all that glitters is gold. You're conjuring an image of some person who thinks that everything is as it seems, and she's buying a stairway to heaven. And so that kind of plays with the concept of rich people getting into heaven, and the Bible heavily talks about you not getting to heaven if you rich. I don't believe none of that shit, but it's in there, folks. You're not going to heaven if you rich. The Lank God Bible is you're never going to make good music if you're rich. Sorry, folks. Poor people make good music. Rich people don't make good music. Marvin Gaye didn't sing that good because he had a great life. But it also has some hints of like scam talk. You know, if she believes all that glitters is gold, that would mean that she's probably naive. So she's buying a stairway to heaven. It's not just she's actually buying a stairway to heaven, but maybe someone is selling her a stairway to heaven, which could be fake. So there are a lot of different ways that you can kind of interpret that one line, specifically because they don't tell you specifically how to interpret it, but they use imagery that you can relate to certain different emotional context or cultural context. So imagery is very useful, again, for painting a picture, and if you're like not super vague, but like if you have clear things that the listener can tie those images to, you can get them to feel a certain way without necessarily just telling them to feel that way. It kind of allows the listener to step into the songwriter's shoes and fill in the gaps that the songwriter has left with their own personal experiences, which is very valuable. It allows the listener to connect to the lyrics a little bit more, you know, whereas you listen to a J. Cole song, and if you weren't, you know, if you don't directly relate to him popping boners in math class, you're not going to relate to that song. So with imagery, we could talk a little bit about metaphor and simile. It's just comparing one thing to another thing. It's not really important to know what a metaphor is specifically and what a simile is specifically, but people are gonna fucking act stupid if I don't say it. So a metaphor is when you say a thing is a thing, and a simile is when you say a thing is like a thing. So, metaphor, he's boiling mad. Simile, he's hot like a pot of boiling water. Different journey, same definition or destination. They're both forms of imagery. It's just like, I don't think it's too important to get hung up on the specifics as far as imagery goes. Because again, it's not like, it's more for like textural, emotional qualities. Conveying what you mean without stating every single fact of the situation, because listing a series of events factually is not interesting J. Cole. So personification is another form of imagery, and it's basically giving an animal, an object, a human trait. So if a gangster rapper was gonna say like, my Glock hungry and you looking like a meal, obviously a gun can't be hungry, but it's an effective form of imagery, eager to shoot. So you know about this already, I'm sure. Like, it's not that useful to directly be like, that's personification. It's more important to focus on like, this is a way that people use imagery that I tend to enjoy. Whatever, just pay attention to your favorite artists or your favorite books and movies. If you're more into the way that they use this kind of textural stuff, pay special attention to how they're achieving that goal. I'm willing to bet that 99% of the time it's going to be through some form of imagery. And then on to the intellectual segment, which is not a great name for the segment, but I kind of wanted to juxtapose it against like the more emotional textural and also keep the naming format. So the first thing I'm gonna mention real quick is references. I feel like people don't necessarily talk about it in depth too much, but obviously a reference is just mentioning something specific. It might be a character from a movie or a book or a game. It might be a celebrity's name. It might be, though, saying a cliche or an idiom, just something that someone else will recognize, I think can be considered a reference. And it's a really open-ended description of it, but, you know, it's something that, like, it doesn't matter that much to observe because you'll probably be referencing things just as you write. People reference stuff all the time, every day, you know, be like, oh, he's wilding out like Kanye or something. So current events, stuff like that. Current events maybe can make a song seem dated, and I'll bring that up again in a little bit, but a reference isn't necessarily always a movie reference or something. It's more about establishing familiarity with the audience and then using that familiarity to create impact. A lot of times it's by diverting the expectations that come with the reference that you're making. A lot of times it's by maintaining the expectation that comes with the reference you're making. But it's basically, references are useful for establishing expectations. And foundations, when I was talking earlier about like having a rhythmic foundation that lasts a few bars, that's in line with that. A lot of like lyrical work or, you know, even plot and like prose is about building an expectation and then paying off on that expectation somehow. So references are a great way to create an expectation, a certain kind of way. I think it's also worth mentioning like self-references, or as comedians call them, callbacks, or you could think of it as longer term repetition, which I enjoy. Like if you listen to A$AP Ferg's first album, Trap God or Trap Lord, there are a lot of songs in there where he'll pull lyrics and stuff from other songs and say them in that song as well. And I enjoyed that a lot. The self-referential nature of that album appealed to me a lot. And there's also a lot of repetition on that album in general. But I think it's really solid and it works really well because self-referential can add more impact to a lyric. It makes it more noticeable. It'll stand out to the audience more because they've heard it more than once. It's not necessarily used a whole lot, but it's really nice. It's a good way to kind of pat your listener on the back and be like, hey, did you hear that in that other song? Well, now I'm saying it in this song. It's a kind of a way to establish a rapport with your audience. You're expecting them to hear this lyric and be like, I've heard this lyric before. So I'm including irony in this area. Basically, irony is when you expect a thing to be a certain way and something happens that contradicts expectations. For an example I could think of is like Meet the Parents by Jay-Z. Deadbeat dad leaves a woman after she gives birth, doesn't see his son for 14 years, his son ends up killing him, and it's basically a result of not having his father in his life. So there's irony. Because the character wasn't in his son's life, his son grew up to be a thug, and similar to the way that his father was a thug, and while his father was out thugging around, he runs into his son who kills him, and his son probably wouldn't have killed him if he had been in his life. That's irony. Like that's a more common use of irony, something kind of biting you in the ass that you expected not to. But with literary irony, there's so many different versions, it makes everything an irony. So I don't really like to talk about it too much. So I think a better way to think of it lyrically is misdirection, rather than like specifically irony, because irony in the way that we use it in day-to-day conversations can be valuable. It's a little more difficult for me to quantify in this video, and probably is used a little bit less lyrically than like literary irony, which is just diversion from expectations. So a better way to put it lyrically would be misdirection. When you build an expectation, you subvert the expectation. It can mean a lot of things, but basically misdirection, it can be like short-term or long-term. A longer-term misdirection might be developing a certain certain character or a persona across the length of a song or an album or a movie, and then having the character or the persona act or emote in a certain way that subverts the audience's expectation for that character or persona. And that misdirection can be valuable if it's a meaningful subversion of expectations. A shorter term, let's go real short, a misdirection would be like maybe in a line you start to say a commonly known phrase, a cliche, or an idiom, and then you finish it rather than with the traditional ending, something that changes the ending to mean something else. You're building the audience's expectation based on their familiarity with the saying, and then subverting it by changing how it ends. And again, if the subversion is meaningful, it can give that more impact. Misdirection can be used a lot of different ways, and it's used everywhere. It's used as a plot device, visually in movies. Misdirection, you might see one version of a scene and then it pans out and it's actually totally different. That's used a lot of time for dramatic impact or for comedic impact. Instrumentally, misdirection, I know a lot of producers out there are like, oh yeah, if you when it loops back, don't have the note hit on the one this time, move it back a half bar. That's a misdirection. The audience expects it to hit on the one, and you subvert that expectation. And the only reason they expect it to hit on the one is because it hit on the one the previous 8 bars or whatever. So the important thing is to understand how you're going to develop the audience expectation and then subvert it. So I'll talk a little bit about how it's applicable in songwriting a little bit more as I talk about wordplay. There are a million things that could be considered wordplay. I'm not going to be able to cover them all, obviously, but I'll just say a bunch of shit and give some examples, and hopefully you'll learn something. Specifically, I'd like to focus more attention on double meanings. We can say that misdirections and double meanings are the major basis of wordplay. And since I already talked about misdirection, we'll go over double meanings, and then you'll know it all. Obviously, some words mean more than one thing. Wordplay is using a word's dual or triple, however many meanings, in an interesting way. And because this is an auditory art form, it also includes words that sound similar. There are a lot of ways that you can do it. I'll just drop some examples. I will say that dual meanings typically function in groups when you're talking about wordplay. The first 2 bars of that How Great remix I mentioned earlier also have a double meaning. It's not just internal rhyming going on. So again, I open it with, I'm dedicated to getting famous or getting faded, like some jeans, so it seems, I guess I made it. So I open up with the simile that operates on a double meaning. I'm getting faded like some jeans. So obviously I'm faded as in drunk, high, whatever. And jeans are faded like acid washed or whatever the hell. I just know that faded jeans are a thing. So I'm playing with the double meaning of faded. So it's not as literal as a simile like cold as ice. That's very literal. Oh, you're as cold as ice. Ice is cold. I'm saying I'm getting faded like some jeans. I'm not literally fading, like the color in me isn't fading away. I'm faded because I'm drunk. So that's one way to play with the double meaning within a simile. The bar also sets up the jeans imagery that drives the second bar. So, spoiler, this second bar is really clever. So I say I'm dedicated to getting famous or getting faded, like some jeans, so it seems, I guess I made it. So the first line, dedicated to getting famous or getting faded. Basically, I'm saying I'm committed to either becoming a successful entertainer or a drunk nobody. And then I say, so it seems, to imply that I'm not actually trying to be a drunk nobody. It just appears that way to bystanders. It looks like all I do is work on art stuff and drink. So it seems that I'm dedicated to getting famous or getting faded. And then I end the line with, I guess I made it, kind of admitting defeat. I'm not a successful entertainer, but I did make it as a drunk nobody. But there's also a very subtle double meaning. Faded, like some jeans, so it seems, I guess I made it. This is a meaning that is so subtle, and some might say, totally bullshit, that most listeners probably never noticed it. But I put it there on purpose when I wrote the song, and every time I listen to it, I chuckle. I'm literally saying, I sewed a pair of pants. I guess I made it a pair of pants. Now, if we move on towards the end of the song, I use a series of movie and TV references with a bunch of different double meanings, and some of them are actual double meanings, some of them are more auditory doubles. So, last few bars are, who wanna be a millionaire, buy some BBC, you see, who wanna be a billionaire, boy join the club if I ain't gotta pay for membership. No perfect pitch, but I take a track and a Kendrick it. Jimi Hendrix it. Do a show, she in the second row. Getting low, call her Britney Spears, cause she getting throwed. Till she wanna start some drama. TNT, set to blow. Told her acting up will only make another episode. I binge watched the show, I know how every story ends. From season 1 to season 10, we better off as horny friends. No Corey and Topanga story for me, I'm the bachelor. Shorty fall for me, I ain't catching her. So let's break it down. So the first bar, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, establishes that I'm going to be making a bunch of television references. You might not notice it right away because I haven't made any more TV references. So on its own, the listener probably will associate it with a television show, but might not know that I'm about to say a million shows in a row. So the next bar, I kind of slip a television reference in under the radar. Buy some BBC, you see, Who Wanna Be a Billionaire, Boyle joined a club, etc. So I take the BBC and turn it into a Billionaire Boys Club reference, which kind of diverts attention away from the intended reference, the reference that continues the television line of references, which is BBC, the television channel. And because it's near the beginning of the film and TV references, it's something a listener might not notice on the first listen, which is nice because it gives the song built-in replay value. If your audience is listening to your songs a bunch of times, and every so often they're hearing something new, they're figuring out a new way to interpret a bar, they're gonna have a greater attachment to it. They'll feel smart. They're like, oh, I get it. I got the joke. You know, it's a nice feeling. We've all felt like that listening to music. So it's nice to put that kind of stuff in for a listener. So I continue. Buy some BBC, you see, Who Wanna Be a Billionaire. Boy, join the club if I ain't gotta pay for membership. No perfect pitch, but I'll take a track and a Kendrick it. I'm literally saying I don't have perfect pitch, but I'll take a track and I'll Kendrick it. Kendrick Lamar, we all know Kendrick Lamar. It means I'm saying basically I'm going to spit bars. But I also use the auditory meaning, double meaning. I'm not saying and I Kendrick it. I'm saying Anna Kendrick it, which is why I say no perfect pitch. Pitch Perfect fans are going to hear the perfect pitch and they might catch that when I say Anna Kendrick's name because she's the star of Pitch Perfect. And again, this is continuing an established set of references to movies and television that I started previously. So again, double meanings, they work best in conjunction with one another. That means establishing a theme a lot of time is helpful, in this case, movie TV references, and then kind of stretching different things to fit that theme. So like the and no perfect pitch, but I take a track and a Kendrick it is a lot harder to notice without establishing in the previous couple bars that I have begun making television and movie references. And it's still, you might not notice it if you don't know who Anna Kendrick is. She's the Cups girl. She do the cups. Then I go on to Jimi Hendrix it, do a show, television, another real sly one. Do a show, she in the second row, getting low, call her Britney Spears cause she getting throwed. Now, getting throwed means drunk, but I'm playing off the dual meaning of a spear and getting throwed. So Britney Spears was known to like party and shit back in the day. But the real meaning, the punchline there, is that I'm calling her Britney Spears because she's getting throwed, and you throw a spear. Till she wanna start some drama, TNT set to blow. So this is a dated reference now, but back in the day, there was a channel called TNT, and the slogan was, we know drama. So I say, start some drama. TNT set to blow, because obviously TNT is also an explosive, working with some dual meanings there. And blow, TNT blows up, but also blowing up is a way of describing someone having an outburst. So TNT set to blow, told her acting up, will only make another episode. Obviously acting, TV and film. And then an episode is also a way for you to describe an outburst in real life. Oh, we had an episode at the restaurant. Something dramatic happened at the restaurant. Typically, an episode is the way, when you use it to describe a real life situation, it means something dramatic happened. But it's also a way of talking about one part of a TV show. You watch them in episodes. I binge watched the show. I know how every story ends, continuing the television metaphor, and kind of bringing it to the forefront the way have another episode. It kind of centers it more rather than being something that I'm kind of doing on the side, sliding in television references. At this point, I'm bringing it more to the forefront. So I say I binge watched the show. I know how every story ends. From season 1 to season 10, we better off as horny friends. Again, I'm bringing the metaphor of the television television thing to the forefront when talking about my relationship with this fictional woman, but I'm also sliding in a very sly Friends reference at the very end of that bar. I said Friends on purpose because it's a TV show and they be horny. They all be fucking each other. And then no Corey and Topanga story for me, I'm the Bachelor. Shorty fall for me, I ain't catching her. Corey and Topanga, that's Boy Meets World. They had a nice little love story, so I'm saying I'm not gonna have that. And then I slide in a Bachelor reference. I'm the Bachelor, like the television show. Shorty fall for me, I ain't catching her. And so that last bar, and has nothing to do with the television dual meanings, but I'm playing with the dual meaning of falling. Falling for someone is falling in love, but if you literally fall, oh, I might catch you. Well, you know, if you're falling for me, I'm not catching you. I'm not picking up what you're putting down. So because there are just like a million ways to play with dual meanings, like I like this last bit that I shared because there are more direct ways to do it where you're using a more overt metaphor to directly compare, you know, one thing to another thing via like dual meanings of certain words. But there are also subtler ways to do it where you can kind of just slide certain references in to sentences that make sense without those references. So pay special attention. If you want to get good at wordplay, I definitely recommend paying special attention to all the different ways people play with dual meanings and stuff, because it's the biggest thing in wordplay is dual meanings, tying different things together that aren't normally related to make some kind of humorous point. So I got about an hour of footage that I'm about to fucking cut down here. And no one's gonna watch this. I just make this stuff so that when I die, you can't deny that I existed. If you learned something, throw me a like. Subscribe because I still haven't reached 100 sub minimum, and I want to put Lank God in my URL. I'd really love to do that. And leave a comment. You know, maybe you want me to do more lyric analysis. I can do certain songs if you're interested in it, or some of my own stuff. I've got a lot of older songs where I do a lot more intricate wordplay and rhyming than I tend to do lately because I don't care as much about that stuff anymore. But I could break some of that down, or if you want to, you know, maybe you want to submit a song and have me shit on it live on YouTube. I could do that. I'll shit on your music. I don't care. Send it to me. I'll tell you it's bad. No, I'll tell you how to improve it. I probably won't like it. Let's be real. I'm a hater, but I'll definitely tell you how to get better. So yeah, leave a comment if you want any of that kind of crap. That's all for this week. See you later.
Got a condo with a cleaner. She must be Madonna, start with Prima. With the drama, she a diva. I got buku pounds of reefer. Dope in my 2-liter. I see snitches in the bushes. I should back it up to beepers. Pull up to the party with a nosebleed. Sniffing on a Sunday. Trying to hit a 3-Peat. I just hit the store for some more of the weekly. Had to double back cause I'm trying to hit